Hi guys and gals, Emily here. It is open house night here at Stambaugh Middle School, so you will have to excuse me if people come over the intercom. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but you guys know how that goes, so I'm not too worried about you guys judging me for people coming over the intercom. Also, parents aren't here yet. Just want to clear that up. I thought I would do this in between school and open house starting. Hi. This week is all about two cases that we talk about here in my 7th grade civics classroom, which would be Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education. Plessy versus Ferguson, happening in 1896, was all about Mr. Plessy, who was, I believe, 1/8 African American, and he was actually approached by this group in Louisiana, and they were like, hey, let's challenge this new law to see if they will actually throw you off of a train car if you, a 1/8 black man, try to sit in the white section. It turns out that they did, in fact, do that, got all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said as long as the train cars are separate and equal, then it's fine. You're not breaking any laws. It is constitutional. So that was the court case that held up the separate versus equal, separate but equal standpoint. Now, fast forward, 1954, we have Brown versus Board of Education, which was, as we know, this was a challenge of the separate but equal stance that the Supreme Court had taken just about 60 years prior. And it turns out that schools did not have these segregated schools. The black schools were not giving students the appropriate materials. It was very apparent that materials were nowhere close to the same caliber that the white schools were. So the court said separate is not equal. And not only that, they took it one step further and said that if you separate the races and give one the better materials and one the hand-me-downs, you're basically saying that one is superior than the other. This is absolutely not constitutional. And so, unfortunately, schools are not integrated because there was not a specific time frame that was given. So that didn't happen immediately, but it did eventually happen, thankfully. And here we are today. One of the things that I think of whenever I think of how these cases apply today is actually something new here in Polk County. Polk County had an overhaul of our discipline system countywide because there was a huge racial disparity in the number of referrals and suspensions for African American students. African American students were getting way more referrals and way more suspensions than white students. So we have instituted the CHAMPS program, which I believe it was Osceola County. Some people in class were talking about the CHAMPS program in Orlando. So countywide, we have implemented the CHAMPS program so that students will better understand expectations and things like that. I actually have my lovely CHAMPS board behind me. Ha ha! That was totally not planned. But we implemented that CHAMPS thing across the county so that students better understand expectations. We also, in our overhaul of the discipline plan, added a behavior interventionalist position at all schools. So we have a behavioral intervention. Yes.
Hey, can you step down to Clay's office?
Yes, I will be down in just a couple minutes.
Thank you.
No problem. Sorry. So, our behavior interventionalist works with students one-on-one and actually works with families as well in order to basically just intervene if we have some frequent flyers or things like that. So that's really good in general. The overhaul of discipline also requires more parent contact for teachers to work with families. And it's also more teacher-monitored behavior steps. So it doesn't just go from classroom issue to referral. Now we have steps in place. For instance, you have to have a student-teacher conference, basically, as step one, document it. If the same behavior happens again the next day, then you would maybe move the seat send them to a cool down spot, which is another champs expectation, things like that, just to give the student more chances. So anyway, that racial disparity is definitely the reason why we overhauled our discipline plan. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was just our schools, and even though our schools are integrated, many communities right now, it just doesn't seem like they are as integrated as we would hope now in 2016, which makes, because our communities aren't quite as integrated as we would hope, students are predominantly find themselves at a black school or a white school sometimes. That doesn't mean that they're the only students there, but there's, in a lot of cases, a much higher percentage of black students at a school as opposed to a community that's predominantly white, where all of the students are going to that school. At my school, we're pretty 30-30-30. We are the only school in Auburndale.
Custodians and teachers, if you have not eaten dinner, you are welcome to come to the main office conference room. Thank you.
But sorry guys, but because Stambaugh is the only middle school in Auburndale, we're predominantly, we have everybody. So we have about 30% white, 30% black, 30% Hispanic for the most part. Now, yeah, so that's kind of how I thought that these two cases affect us today. That's kind of a breakdown of each one of the cases. I actually go over these with my students. They love talking about it and get really fired up about the Plessy versus Ferguson case, because they are just like astounded that separate but equal could ever have been a thing in the first place. Like, how could that have ever become a rule? So anyway, I guess I have to go to the principal's office. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say about my video. And I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say about the assignment this week. So have a great week, and we will catch you later.